Warning: your Twitter fingers may be triggered as a result of this video. Be advised to grab a seat, take a deep breath, and relax before continuing.
How can a team with such a dominant lineup turn into a struggling playoff team? Is this tabletop game worth the $130 that it costs? Is a six-part miniseries enough to reignite one of the biggest franchises back into the top contender? Today, we unpack some of our biggest questions when it comes to the world of entertainment and sports. Before we get started, be sure to check out tribe247.shop. We have bags available in 2 sizes. Get them while supplies last. Now, into the rest of the video.
The Binhoboard is a tabletop game based on soccer, or football, as I'm told it's called in foreign places. Anyways, the tabletop game features a turf board with 2 nets, 4 bands that are supported by easy-to-install screws. It also has 20 player pins that make it look like 2 teams are really taking the field against each other, and it also makes it harder to score goals. It's a lot harder than it looks, trust me. After breaking it out and setting it up, it's very easy to set up, might I add. It took about 5 minutes. We got it set up, started playing, and we quickly realized that, well, it's a good challenge. But, like any game, it's going to take some time to learn. The rules are fairly simple. The game is first to 7. Teams alternate shots where the ball comes to a complete stop. In order for it to be a goal, the ball must completely cross the goal line, and if it goes in and bounces out, it is still a goal. If that's not enough of a challenge for you, you will be penalized with yellow and red cards depending upon where you are on the field when you commit the penalty and what type of penalty it is. A yellow card results in the opposing team kicking off from midfield, and a red card results in the opposing team essentially having a pool scratch. They can put the ball anywhere behind the midline, and you have to remove a player decided by a coin flip. I thoroughly enjoy the Binhoboard. Personally, I find everyone that comes to play me for the first time ends up sitting down. They intend on playing a game or two, and we end up running it back over and over again for hours, like we're kids playing Call of Duty again on a console. Likewise, I find myself doing the same when I walk by the board. I'll stand there, fuck around with it for 10, 20 minutes, and then realize that I need to go and get productive again. It's not the easiest game to master, but the key is to learn the technique, and that comes with time, like I said. And setup is quick and easy. Games get real intense, are very fun, and occasionally get a bit lengthy just because it is first to 7, and when you start playing, you are not very good. A few issues I have with the game is flicking the marble long enough will compel you to stop. It leaves you with the same sensation that you had in your finger when you were a child after you just try to flick it as hard as you can. It's really not the best strategy in the game, as you can take the same shot twice and you will never get the same result, I swear. Sometimes it just feels like the luck of the bounce, and sometimes there's definitely skill involved, and like I said, it's all about your technique, but you can take the same shot as your opponent, or you can, like I said, you can put the ball in the same place, same power, same target, and it'll go 2 different ways. And it's nice because you'll never have the same outcome in any game, but it does get a little frustrating sometimes. I do feel like the board is a little bit crowded. Trying to get out of your own zone sometimes is a definite that someone's going to have an own goal almost every match, sometimes multiple, and it will keep your opponent in the game. And like I said, it is nice that it keeps the competitiveness up, but when you're scoring on yourself and your opponent has not even scored a goal yet, it gets really frustrating. I'm not sure how you would fix this from a design perspective, perhaps making the board literally an inch wider and just moving those pins out literally by hairs. But I don't know. I'm not the game designer, and I've only been playing for about 2 weeks. So, in conclusion, I think the Binhoboard is a great game. It's perfect to sit down, play with friends. You can smoke, have a drink, whatever. We played a game the other night where when each team scored, we would each hit the bong. So we essentially were playing it like Pong. And it could definitely be a contender at a party game. I could totally see this being a rival to Pong. It's much smaller, easier to pack and be mobile with. And honestly, it's a lot more fun. I enjoy the fact that you can customize the board with band sets and pins. You can also literally buy a custom board if you're willing to spend the money. So I would say that the $100 to $200 that this board is worth is definitely worth the buy.
How can a team with a dominant lineup and rock-solid rotation, where in almost every game it seemed like a guaranteed win, slowly turn into a struggling playoff team? Here's what I saw. The 2022 Yankees started out on track to have one of, if not the best single-season records of all time. They were the first team to 50 wins. They were sitting pretty at the All-Star break as the American League favorite. There were so many storylines. Aaron Judge on pace to break the home run record. Clay Holmes being the best arm in the entire bullpen, in the entire league. And Nestor Cortez proving himself as a guy in the league, making his first spot on the All-Star team. And with the full minor league system stacked with young players, it almost seemed like the 28th World Championship was coming straight to the door. Early in the season, every starter, they pitched like an ace. They wouldn't give up that many runs. And the few games that they did, they would hold on until the 6th or 7th inning until it was time to call to the bullpen. Today's day and age, it's not that common. You get guys going 4 or 5 innings. So in the first half, when the Yankees were going deep into almost every game, they were easing their bullpen and not using them way too much, saving their arms for the entire season. But once everybody started to slow down, it turned into the Nestor Cortez show. And the pressure, it probably got to him because about after the All-Star break, his numbers started to come down to earth and he looked like a normal pitcher instead of that top guy that he was looking like. And when they got rid of Jordan Montgomery at the All-Star break, it kind of messed up the starting rotation. They were one of the few teams that had 2 lefties in the rotation. It's not a crazy thing, but when you have that advantage, it kind of sucks to get rid of it. The Harrison Bader piece, it was a good chip later down in the year, but at first it kind of seemed very questionable. Most Yankee fans, we were very surprised by the Montgomery trade. It just popped up out of nowhere in the last day. So that was probably one thing that kept the rotation struggling was they all had to find their new piece since that guy wasn't there later in the back end. So yeah, in my opinion, one mistake that the Yankees made was getting rid of that lefty piece. Like I said, it's not a huge mistake. They did manage with the other pitchers, a lot of guys, and a lot of teams have right-handed rotation dominant. But we were one of the very few teams that had multiple lefties to go to in any inning. We had 2 guys early, and then we had a handful of pitchers in the bullpen. When it comes to the bullpen, you can only speculate on what could have been. And I say that because in the first half, they were the best bullpen in the entire league. Clay Holmes was the best pitcher, and he had a solid group behind him. Clark Schmidt, who else? Wandy Peralta. There was a bunch of other guys, but when the injury bug came around to get Chad Green, Chapman, Loizica, Domingo Herman, Marinaccio even went down for a little bit, they kind of went to a few guys way too much. They heavily went to Clay Holmes, heavily went to Clark Schmidt, and they heavily went to Wandy Peralta. Peralta, he held his own throughout the whole year, even the playoffs. But going to Clay Holmes and Clark Schmidt way too much, it bit them in the ass later in the year because in the postseason, they kind of struggled. And, in their last spot where they brought in Clark Schmidt in Clay Holmes' position, they probably looked at it like, we use Clay too much. We could give Clark these innings, and then it fucked them. So another big mistake that the Yankees made with the pitching rotation was only relying on 3 guys in the bullpen when you have about 10 guys you could go to at any time. They should have added a bigger name in the All-Star break on the bullpen right before the trade deadline. They added Weiser and Efros, and those guys, they did pretty well. But like I said, it wasn't a big name in the league. Probably should have went for Josh Hader. I don't know if he was looking for the Yankees because he has that hair and he probably does want to cut it. But Josh Hader probably would have been the best bullpen piece to grab. It's another lefty. And later we didn't even have Chapman, so our big lefty that everybody thinks about, he wasn't even there. So that's one thing that they missed the ball on, definitely dropped it, needed lefties, and they got rid of one of their lefties, and that was a big mistake. Finally, the thing we all want to talk about is the inconsistent batting lineup and playing position players in the field who shouldn't be there. From the start of the season, the conversation around the field was that Aaron Judge needed to have a big season to get the big contract that he was hoping for. IKF was here to hold the spot for the young guys, and Donaldson could still bowl. And even Hicks projected that he would have a 30-30 season. The minute those things didn't happen, it should have meant they brought up the young guys to fill in those spots and to get their feet wet. so that later in the year the conversation is that the young guys aren't ready or that Aaron Judge is carrying this Yankees team to the playoff spot that they had locked up. If it means playing the two young kids on the left side, making Donaldson your DH and sitting IKF for a week, those things should have been written out and communicated with the entire team because everybody looked off. You know, in the playoffs, with Aaron Hicks went out, everybody else in the outfield playing Cabrera, they didn't look comfortable. They weren't a unit. They didn't play there much together, so the chemistry wasn't fully built the way that it needed to be. They tried to add help early in the season with the struggling when they brought in Benintendi and Harrison Bader, but they couldn't really find their bats late in the year. They were struggling heavily, and they really fucked up by showing their pieces, telling everybody that they were going to bring the young guys up and give them playing time. But then later they didn't give them any playing time that they really needed. You know, they played Cabrera. Cabrera held his own. He was a blessing to this Yankees team. He was that energy that they needed. Played outfield and infield. He wasn't even an outfielder really in the minors, but he looked like a solid major league outfielder. But when Peraza, they should have had Peraza play for IKF or Donaldson. You know, you could play IKF at third base. He won his Gold Glove there in 2020. And you play Peraza at shortstop. But they really fucked up by not getting those pieces set in stone early. Telling everybody that you were going to use the rookies and the young kids, but didn't go to them. It kind of made every Yankee fan hate the front office midway through the year. And you heard that when all the ceremonies, they would boo the owner and all those people. So they really need to, in this upcoming season, they really need to use the young guys wisely and get together a consistent batting lineup. Use your leadoff hitters as leadoff hitters. Get your guys that move guys over, get on base, so that the big bats in Judge, Stanton, and Rizzo, they could drive in the runs instead of having to hit solo home runs to get onto the board. Going into the offseason with around $100 million to add onto their annual salary, the Yankees, they brought back Rizzo, 17 for 2 years, $40 million guaranteed. They brought back IKF. I don't know, maybe they'll use him as a trade piece midway through the season, or so they didn't have to get rid of draft picks. Who knows? But they need to re-sign Aaron Judge to whatever contract he wants. Make him the first $40 million player. Give him an 8-year contract. The contract leaked. We're recording this video the week that his contract got leaked to $337 million. So if you put that on 8 years, you know what I mean. It's a pretty good contract. He makes $40 million a year. Probably if they want to add a little bit more. I told my brother earlier in this year, I think his contract will be $42 million. Pay him. Bring back Benintendi. If you don't bring Benintendi, definitely get Yoshida from Japan. He said he wants to go to the Phillies. He posted that picture of the Bryce Harper jersey. You might have to throw him a sweeter deal than the Phillies give him. But I definitely think if you don't bring Benintendi, get Yoshida. He's just like him. He's a good leadoff hitter, but with more power. And if you don't go those two routes, I said bring Jerickson Profar. He's a switch hitting batter. He could play infield the days that the guys need rest in the middle. Or he could be our everyday left fielder or right fielder when Judge needs a break. Another thing they need to add is left-handed pitching. Bring up the young guys. They made a move with Matt Crook. They brought him in for the bullpen. They need to use some trade pieces and IKF later in the year. Hicks or Donaldson to offload their contracts to bring in some younger guys. You could probably put a sweet young deal together to the Orioles with their young up-and-coming team. They have a big group of pitchers, so maybe we could trade one of our starters and some of our outfielders, maybe Florial, maybe Peraza, maybe Torres. I don't know what they're thinking, but definitely we could get 2 pitchers from the Orioles. The Mariners sound like they really want Gleyber Torres. We could probably work a deal with them. There's another few left-handed free agents out there. Taylor Anderson or Rogers. I think Rogers is his name. Brad Hand are some other options. I don't think grabbing Carlos Rodon will be the smartest move. He's a little more expensive. But I think grabbing a left-handed younger guy that you could pay minimum for about a year or two is definitely the way to go to offload some of this money. So you give Judge the max contract that you're saying. They did say they have enough money to give Judge his money and bring another big name. So if they do try to make a jump in the shortstop market, I do see them getting rid of Gleyber Torres, sending him to Seattle. That would allow Peraza to play second base, and then either Carlos Correa, Trey Turner, Dansby Swanson to play shortstop. So yeah, my critique did sound like what the TV makes it seem all Yankees fans feel. The season was a failure. We didn't win the World Series. The players won the accomplishments, but we don't care about that. Honestly, we really don't. Hats off to Aaron Judge winning the MVP. Hats off to Trevino. But we won a World Series. Been too many years. We have the team. Just grab the left-handed pitchers. Make your lineup solid so everybody knows where they're playing. They know the mindset to come in every day, and you won't have a problem with guys fucking up later in the year, being uncomfortable or not really being true to themselves. So yeah, that's my thoughts on this season. Hopefully next year we do walk away with that 28th World Series. We do need to bring up some of those young guys and play them every day. We need pitching. Management, figure your shit out. Pay Judge. Make him the first position player to make $40 million a year.
7 years ago, we saw the return of Star Wars. The Force Awakens released, and the entire world was booming. It was once again the top franchise in the world. Looking back, we have now seen that we've gone through our various ups and downs over the course of the years, and the release of the movies, some being praised, others being notoriously hated, and others just being split 50-50 between the community. We saw chaos within the community, people bashing each other online, and it wasn't until the return of The Mandalorian that we saw stabilization, and everyone was kind of saying that, hey, this was good. And we felt that Star Wars was moving in the correct pace. We had the release of Clone Wars after that, and everything was shaping up for it to come back in like a Marvel-esque way and be great, like the phase 1 through 3. Unfortunately, it did not go as planned. Most of the promised content came out and was bland and unfinished, featuring returning heroes and familiar faces, but the stories sometimes didn't even feature the heroes covered in the story, or they downright just ended up being about someone else entirely. That said, what we got was alright and was watchable, but enjoyable was meh. It was mid. However, with the release of Andor, the community started to come back. Personally, myself, I was on the last straw and started to die out. And especially the way Andor started didn't seem like it was going to be the way it is now. We're recording this as it's coming out. I believe it's wrapping up right now. I'm still in the early episodes as I just restarted. But what really re-sparked my want to watch Star Wars again was Tales of the Jedi. This 6-part little miniseries, animated and directed by Dave Filoni, was amazing. Top-notch Star Wars. It told 2 arcs, 3 episodes about Ahsoka and 3 about Dooku. And the way that it was split up was very creative. The first episode, quite slow. It's Ahsoka and her mother, and they're on a hunt. And this is where you learn that she's a Jedi for the very first time. But what it really does is it sets the setting. She's a young baby, probably around Phantom Menace or pre-Phantom Menace era, and now we kind of get the idea of when we or where we are on the timeline and when we are in the universe. Then we move on to Dooku's arc, and we get 3 episodes straight through, and it is beautiful. We see young Qui-Gon, Mace Windu, and we see the contrasts between the dogmatic Jedi that follow their ways and are straying from them really, and we see Dooku, who's really just misunderstood. And that's something that we never really saw from his character before. Dave Filoni is really good at fleshing out characters, making them deeper, and just diving into the story and connecting the dots. And that is exactly what he's doing here. He also killed a great theory that Yaddle would have been able to save or be the mother of Grogu, and that is just something I love that Dave Filoni also does. He kills off characters in ways that it's just like, wow. There's so much hype around that character, and now they're literally gone. That said, we saw a lot of similarities between Dooku and Anakin. Dooku having his chance to really prove himself to Palpatine was cool. Seeing him delete the Camino file was also pretty cool. as we learn about that in Attack of the Clones. Like I said, it's really bringing everything together in a beautiful fashion. And the storytelling is still very simple, although the lore is rich. Moving to the last two episodes of the series, we saw Ahsoka training with Anakin and Rex, and we see her trained all the way up to that final moment of Clone Wars Season 7, where she has to use all those skills to really prove herself and survive Order 66. And the really cool thing about this episode in particular, Episode 5, is that she's put to the test not just against what's expected of her. Anakin shows his creativity as a master and his willingness to go outside the box. He doesn't just have her go up against the little droids and have her fit to compete and be able to defend herself in the world and galaxy against droids and just mechanical beings. He put her up to the test against clones, and she did not back down. And he had her stick in there. And he knew that she was going to be there the whole time and get through it. And she did. All the way up, all the way through the Clone Wars. And it proved to be useful to her. In that last episode, it was also really cool to see her in Padme's funeral. And then disappear and end up having to take on the Inquisitor. Literally striking him down within like 2 moves. That was very samurai-esque. And I really appreciated that. That was Akira Kurosawa-esque at its finest, and it was amazing. And just once again, being able to see her utilize the skills and see her training get fleshed out, and learn that she isn't a Mary Sue. Like I said, that was part of the downs of the past 7 years with a character like Rey, where we didn't get to see her train and learn where she got these powers. It's really cool to see a character learn the power and then be able to use it. Take like Batman, for example. Batman gets his ass handed to him every time in the start of the episode, whether it's the cartoon and it's just a 20-minute episode or it's a movie. Like the first half is always him finding out, tracking the villain, and then bang, he gets his ass kicked. Then what does he do? He trains, he builds a gadget, something. He learns an ability that he can use to defeat that villain, and the whole way we see him do that. And that's what makes Batman a great series. Star Wars needs to continue making content like Tales of the Jedi moving forward. It really got me back into the series. I was on the last straw, like not even tuning into it at this point. And now I'm back. I'm watching through Andor. It's really good. As I said, I thought it was going to start out with Andor just looking for his sister, and it was going to end up just really being about his sister. Kind of like how Kenobi was with Leia. It really didn't feel like it was about Kenobi. That's just my opinion, though. But moving forward, I'd really like to see Filoni continue to make little series like Tales of the Jedi. If he gets a Season 2 or Tales of the Sith, would be really cool, too. And he can just continue to connect the dots, while as Favreau continues to expand new horizons like The Mandalorian, create live-action shows. That'd be really great, because now you have cartoons and live-action shows in a 1-2 punch there. You need one more person, though, who can kind of be a moderator to this, either making books and really fleshing out the lore. And I think the perfect person for that is Timothy Zahn. He created the Thrawn character. He's beloved by most of the franchise. And to be honest, this man is a well-astounded writer. I mean, you read through any of his books as an adult, and you're like, oh, this is a child's book. And then you're ended up glued to the whole series. I think moving forward, Star Wars has a great opportunity to hit the ball out of the park and really become that top franchise again.